Hey everyone, it's Tuesday, it's 3 o'clock. That means it's Tech Tuesday. Today's topic is CALEA. The FCC is looking at mandating how those CALEA plans are filed in the future electronically. And I think CALEA is something that a lot of internet providers have no idea what it is or that they should be doing it. Be right back. Thanks for joining me. Rick Uzi here with Tech Tuesday. So CALEA is something, it's not, you might see CALEA, if you look up CALEA, you'll see CALEA.org and lots of references to the Commission on Accreditation of Law Enforcement Agencies. It's not that. That is something that does that service, accredits law enforcement agencies. CALEA is actually the Communications Assistance, Communications Assistance for Law Enforcement Act. So it's actually a piece of legislation that was passed that gives the FCC enforcement authority over internet service providers, and really it's for law enforcement. So what it's meant to do is that if there is a lawful intercept request where something like the FBI needs to be able to do a live tap, so to speak, on broadband or VoIP service, that they can request that, and a service provider, internet provider, has to be able to do that within a very short period of time. So originally back in 1995 or so, they realized, originally people could do pen registers and taps and all kinds of things on analog phone switches. So, the old phone switches that, were as tall as a building, and, mechanical switches, and then they became electronic switches, but they still allowed for some, it was analog switching. So it still allowed for, fairly easy phone taps, those kinds of things. But then obviously as we moved into the broadband world, and in 1995, especially, as even before broadband, they realized that, wow, there's a lot of digital switches, digital phone switches out there. So they came out with the original CALEA that covered phone companies having to get equipment in place to be able to do these kinds of intercepts, these lawful intercepts on digital phone traffic. Then in 2005, that was expanded to broadband operators and VoIP providers, which sometimes are both one and the same. So it needed to require not just digital phone service through your standard, like a standard phone switch, digital phone switch, but also just internet communication of any kind that's taking over broadband as well as VoIP. So in 2005 that happened. It was it was mandated at that time, and there was a lot of news and activity at that point, as a lot of service providers were getting prepared to maybe on how to do that. There are a couple of ways to do that. One is that you have to do everything yourself, which is really kind of difficult because, well, these don't come up every day, but they do come up every now and then. And when they do come up, you have to be able to respond. And the more customers you have, the more likely it is that a law enforcement agency is going to want to snoop on one of your customers. Now, this is for, these have to be, there's got to be a subpoena from a judge, that kind of thing. It's got to be a specific CALEA request. So there's usually a good reason for this. I would think there's hopefully always a good reason for this, but you need to be able to respond. So CALEA, now is something that everybody has had to do since 2005. And one of the requirements was that as an internet service provider, you needed to file what was called a systems integrity plan, basically. Which is something that says how you will handle CALEA requests to make sure that you've got a policy in place and that you keep that information secure. And we're actually going to look at one today. I'll show you a sample SSI kind of plan. So normally, these were, when you got your CALEA stuff in place, then you mailed a hard copy of that. It was all paper. You mailed a hard copy of that to the FCC, and who knows what they did with it, if anything. In fact, I remember hearing people say, you know what, nobody's sending those in anymore. The FCC doesn't really want to deal with them. And so I think there's been some lax stuff happening there with these SSI plans. Well, the FCC has come out and said that they're putting together, or they have put together, an electronic filing system. So now, rather than dealing with paper, it's voluntary. It's going to be voluntary at first, where, hey, wouldn't it be better to be able to enter all this stuff into the FCC system online, and then your SSI plan can be up there. But then you see here, so this is the FCC public notice, basically, back from June on this, and you see that it's seeking comment on new CALEA electronic filing system for SSI plans, but it's starting out as voluntary, so voluntary electronic filing of CALEA system security and integrity plans, and seeks comment on mandatory electronic filing. So I think they're probably going to go to the mandatory filing because everybody is mandated to file these plans. The voluntary part will first be just for those people that either have to file a new plan, I think, or maybe if they need to update their plan, which you need to update if contacts change, those kinds of things. I believe that's the voluntary part, or maybe they're just saying that voluntarily, you can use it or you can send in the old paperwork for some period of time. But I think this is going to wind up going mandatory because it's better for everybody, right? It saves trees, saves time. It's good for the operator. It's good for the FCC. What it's not good for is if you don't have an SSI plan, because it might then, once they go to a mandatory filing, it might actually be easier to search and find out, hey, it might shed more light on the fact that there are some operators that have not filed their plan. And if they have not filed their plan, then the FCC may be looking into, well, why haven't you filed your plan? Do you have a plan? Are you ready to be able to do CALEA when it comes up? So, and that's really the key, is that what determines whether or not you are in compliance is whether you can comply. There's not, you have to have a plan filed. You're supposed to have a plan filed. And I think if they go mandatory, you'll have to have a plan filed. And then, the real question is whether you comply when you get a request, one of these lawful intercept requests. Then you have to be able to do everything that you're supposed to do. And that's where it gets a little hairy, because if you're not prepared to do that, we can be talking about fines of like $10,000 a day until you come into compliance. And the court can also order that you come into compliance, those kinds of things. So this is where you can download this. I'll link to this. And then here you see the public notice. So Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau provides information on implementation of voluntary electronic filing of CALEA system security and integrity plans and seeks comment on mandatory electronic filing. Consistent with the Commission's broad goals of increasing efficiency and modernizing the agency's processes in the digital age, the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau provides initial information on this public notice about the upcoming launch of the Commission's of the CALEA electronic filing system. The filing system will allow covered entities to file their SSI plan confidentially and securely online, eliminating the need for burdensome and costly paper filing. And really, that's what it was before. Is you type it. It's not a long document. You basically type it up, sign it, send it in, and let them deal with it. But again, it's a lot of paper. Until then, members of the public. Oh, here it says. The Bureau will release a public notice later this year, announcing the date that covered entities may begin electronic SSI plan filing via CEFS. So right now, I think there's a potential of going in and actually looking around, but later they're going to say when you can actually go in and file, and eventually I think they're going to say everybody's going to file this way. Until then, members of the public with FCC registration numbers and FCC user registrations may log in and view the filing screen for informational purposes, but electronic filing will not be enabled. During the comment period, filers can access, and then they've got a link here, the CEF system. Once it's activated for electronic filing, covered entities may file their SSI plans electronically on a voluntary basis starting out. We further propose herein to make electronic filing mandatory 6 months after CEFS is activated. We request comment on this proposal. So in my opinion, this is probably a done deal because I don't know why anybody would object to having this stuff filed electronically. It's certainly, like I say, probably going to be easier for these operators as well as for the operators that are in compliance, as well as for the FCC, and not being in compliance is not a good reason. Background here, Section 105 of the Communications Assistance for Law Enforcement Act, CALEA, and Section blah, 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 requires all telecommunications carriers to file SSI plans with the FCC. In 2006, the Commission expanded CALEA's coverage to require facilities-based broadband internet access providers and interconnected VoIP providers to also file SSI plans. I must file the SSI plans prior to commencing service and must refile a completed update SSI plan within 90 days following any changes to information contained in a previously filed SSI. All SSI plans must contain all information listed under sections blah, blah, blah. Under our current filing procedures, SSI plans must be filed by paper to the Commission by mail or courier. And again, I think a lot of people were doing that during the rush, but since that point, I think there were probably a lot of internet service providers that either didn't do it at that point or new internet service providers that never even thought of this. So this is hopefully going to be educational for some people. CEFS will be a secure, confidential electronic filing system for entities to submit their SSI plans without jeopardizing the sensitivity of these records and will lessen paperwork burdens on SSI plan filers. It's built on a platform that is integrated with the Commission registration system, or the CORS system, to reduce the need for filers to re-enter basic information that CORS users have already provided to the Commission. So CORS is where you normally go in to do stuff related to the FCC, whether I think that's Form 477 is up there. I think the new broadband data collection stuff is part of CORS, if I remember. I know, it's a separate system, but I think it's part of that. Uploading SSI plans. Entities will log into CEFS using their FCC user registration and password, so your FRN number. System will ask users to cut and paste or summarize key data from their SSI plans, so they're assuming you have one already. To help ensure accuracy and compliance with the plan elements required by the Commission, users will then be asked to upload their complete SSI plan as a Word or PDF document in the same format that the current SSI plans are filed. The uploaded SSI plan must be the same format as traditionally have been used for paper SSI filing. So there's no change to the plan. It's just going to be filed electronically. Importantly, with the introduction of CEFS, none of the substantive requirements for what the uploaded SSI plan must include are changing from what paper-filed SSI plans are now required to include. So again, no change to the information. Finally, users requesting confidential treatment of their SSI plans must upload their statement justifying confidentiality. So right now, I believe you can go search for SSI plans, even these paper-filed ones, and maybe see copies of those. So there are probably some right now that are confidential, more people requested, and it's going to be the same here in this system here. CEF user manual and viewing CEFS screens. Further information about that and functions are available on the CALEA website. And there's some links here, including the CEFS user manual. So there's a manual for it. And that's pretty much it on that. I did want to share what one looks like. This is an example or a sample system security integrity plan, SSI plan. So you see here, there's an introduction. So here are some of the key elements, just kind of tell you, and you could Google example SSI plan and find something very similar. So CALEA requires a telecommunications carrier to ensure, before assisting a law enforcement agency in performing electronic surveillance, that the interception is activated, before it's activated, pursuant to a court order or other lawful authorization, and with the affirmative intervention of a senior officer or employee. So you need to, there's a couple of things you need to be doing. You need to make sure that that it's authorized and that the correct kind of senior officer is involved in this and that they're signing off on it. CALEA responsibilities for all employees. All employees are prohibited from conducting any authorized surveillance, from disclosing to any person the existence of or information about any law enforcement investigation or electronic surveillance. So as you create your CALEA protocols in your company, you need to make sure that only a need-to-know limited number of people have access to information about any lawful intercepts that are going on, because you don't want that information to get out to other customers. You don't want that to get out to the news. You don't want that to get out to the person who's being surveilled. So it needs to be a very small number of people that are in control of this. So that's part of what you need to be describing. Designated employees. The employee listed or employees listed on attachment 1 are the designated points of contact for any request by law enforcement for any form electronic surveillance or any information pertaining to such surveillance. So the FBI or local law enforcement, if they're going to do a CALEA request, they need to know who to contact. And that's one of the reasons that these plans have to be filed, is so that they can figure out who to contact. The designated employees will be available to be contacted by law enforcement. I can see a lot of typos in here. By law enforcement 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The designated employees are and shall remain fully appraised of all federal and state statutory provisions. And then there's a bunch of stuff they need to be familiar with, including FISA, of course, CALEA. Designated employees, CALEA responsibilities. Once contacted by law enforcement, the designated employees will be responsible for ensuring that I know that means any, that any form of electronic surveillance is performed with the appropriate legal authorization and the appropriate carrier authorization. That would be, appropriate legal would be an order, warrant, or other authorization issued by a judge or magistrate, and then authorization from the carrier to assist law enforcement. In addition, the designated employee shall determine whether the legal authorization is valid. So you need somebody that can either look at the warrant and say, yeah, this is valid, or have somebody on hand to be able to do that. The identity of the person, the nature, that these things are correct, that it specifies the identity of the person, the nature and location of the communication facilities where this is supposed to take place, a description of the type of communication to be intercepted. Is it email addresses? Is it live data? I mean, we're talking here, what you need to be able to do is be able to do live intercept of broadband and all data that's going over the connection. You need to be able to do that as well if that's part of what's going to take place here. The identity of the agency authorized to intercept the communications, such as maybe the FBI, and the signature of that person authorizing that. Period of time during which the interception is authorized. It's not going to be an open-ended thing. There's going to be a period of time that they're going to be expecting you to be able to deliver this information to them. Determine whether the company is technically capable of performing that. Determine whether the legal authorization is sufficiently detailed. Oversee the implementation of every call intercept or access to call identifying information conducted on the premises of the company. So they need to be really in charge of this whole process. Record keeping, the designated employee shall complete a certification form for every electronic surveillance conducted on company's premises, regardless of whether the surveillance was authorized or unauthorized. So maybe that's not authorized, and you have to record the fact that this was not a valid warrant or was not authorized. Must be completed either simultaneously with or as soon as possible following any electronic surveillance. The completed certification and all attachments shall be maintained in secure files for 5 years from the date of the certification. The date the certification was signed by the designated employee. So this plan is basically taking what the FCC and the federal government wants or requires as far as security integrity and putting it into a document that would be kind of the plan that the company is going to follow. So that's kind of what we're reading through here, is the company saying this is the way we're going to do this and how we're following it. As you see here, it says company, that would be whoever this is, has found that it's a reasonable length of time based on its experience with law enforcement's needs, the length of time it maintains other internal records, and any relevant state statutes. So I'm assuming there that is not that length of time is not a requirement, but they kind of read into the FCC's requirement that you need to store this for a reasonable amount of time, that 5 years is the right amount of time. Then you've got your attachment 1, designated employees, and you've got the person's name and title and what they do, and you can see some of the things here. You could have different people doing different things. You might have an attorney that looks at warrants, but you might have a person here that oversees all of the surveillance, that kind of thing. So you got oversees all electronic surveillance on company premises and implement or designate authority to implement all lawful requests for electronic surveillance on company premises. Then you've got their contact information. Again, 24/7 is when they need to be available. I don't know. I mean, I suppose you could have different contacts for different times. So maybe you have a contact for business hours and a contact for off hours or non-business hours, weekends, those kinds of things. Attachment 2 is a certification of electronic surveillance performed by company name. So this is, if you did do one, then you'd have this, and you'd say the court order or other legal surveillance and any extensions that were granted pertaining to surveillance must be attached to this form. So you got to attach that. And then you got to attach information like the telephone numbers, circuit identification numbers involved, start date and time of the opening of that, name and title of the law enforcement officer, name and title of the judge who signed the authorization, type of surveillance, was it a wiretap, pen register, trap and trace, FISA. List all attachments being filed with this form, and then the person certifies all of that. So that is basically what the SSI plan looks like. So again, CALEA is something that every internet service provider needs to be aware of. And there's a couple of different ways to do this. One is, again, to build all of this stuff yourself. And when I say build it, you've got to have the people. You've got to again, it doesn't come up that often, but it does come up. So you got to have people that are in place that are going to be there for if this were to happen, again, 24/7. They've got to understand these things and be on top of all the rules and regulations. But then you also need to be able to capture this data and transfer it to the law enforcement agency, whoever that is. So there are mediation devices that you can buy that you have to be able to plug those in the right place on your network to be able to get that information intercepted. And then it puts it in a format that the law enforcement agency wants. So it mediates that information, puts it in that format, and then that is transferred over to the law enforcement agency. So you can do all that yourself. But again, unless you're a really big operator, it's kind of hard to maintain all of these things in place. So there are services from people called trusted third parties, and I will mention that we can provide trusted third party services here. So what a trusted third party does is it basically is there kind of in the background just waiting for this to happen. And when it does happen, then you contact them and they take care of everything. They will look at the warrant or the court order or whatever it is, and they'll say, yeah, this looks good. They will either provide you with some equipment that you'll have in your network already, or a lot of times today what people are doing is, and I believe we do it this way, is send something then, as soon as there's a CALEA request, the equipment's sent out, you're given information on how to plug that in, where that goes, and then they assist with and handle all of the transfer of the data to the law enforcement agency. Keep the records, those kinds of things. So again, you can go to our website if you have interest on that, just in finding out more, really. So just go to Zecorum.com, and then under products, you can look under products and go to CALEA services. You see that right there, and you'll come up to the CALEA microsite here. We've got some information about what we provide. An FAQ up here, there's different resources, there's a product sheet, an ebook. So anyway, CALEA is something that you've got to do. I know you don't want to hear that. It's an unfunded mandate, but it's something that has to be done. One of the best ways to do that is by just having a trusted third party there. So you just pay a monthly fee so that they're kind of standing by to do that, rather than have to create everything yourself. And then, like I say, people come and go, and people forget. So you have your network set up, and it's like people leave, and then now you got to do this intercept, and who knows how to install the equipment that we have. Is you need to go in, has the network changed. So one of the things that a lot of times a trusted third party will do is they'll be in touch with you on a regular basis to do network, just to make sure no changes have taken place in your network, and they'll let you know if any changes need to take place in the SSI, that kind of thing. So anyway, check us out if that's of interest to you, and I will go ahead and post a link to that as well on this, as well as to the FCC document that you can look at and see what changes are coming. So again, I think with this electronic filing, it's certainly very possible that there will be more of a spotlight again on have all service providers file their plan. Again, the FCC is not going to come out and make sure that you can do a CALEA request. They just want you to file the plan to know that you have stuff in place that you can do it. And then whether or not you are in compliance will be found out at the point when the FBI comes knocking on your door and says, here's a lawful intercept, a CALEA intercept. We need you to gather information on this particular person and send that to us. And you've got like 24 to 48 hours to be able to do that, to pull that off. I think it might be 48. So, it's something you need to be able to respond to. And if you don't, like I said, there are fines of $10,000 per day, and that can get really expensive over time as you're trying to figure out how you're going to do this. Thanks for joining me. If you've got any comments, you can leave those in the YouTube comment section. I'll be happy to reply to those as I see those. If you're not subscribed, click the subscribe button, click the little bell. If this was helpful, click the thumbs up, and I'd appreciate that. So thanks for joining me. I'll be back tomorrow with another broadband deployment news. See you then.